Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honor, we stand in this solemn courtroom today not just to revisit a heartbreaking tragedy, but to confront the raw and unflinching truth about the fragility of human life, the depths to which darkness can consume a soul, and the irreversible devastation that follows when one person's rage overrides all sense of humanity. Justice, members of the jury, is not an abstract concept. It is the scales that weigh our actions, the mirror that forces us to see the consequences of choices made in anger, in possessiveness, in moments of unchecked emotion. Look at the evidence before you. Lives full of promise extinguished in a blaze of deliberate fury, families torn apart forever, and a young woman whose hidden turmoil led her to wield a vehicle as a weapon of destruction. Imagine, members of the jury, the innocence of youth, the carefree laughter, the shared dreams under summer skies, the simple joy of driving with friends on a quiet night. All of that shattered in an instant by a single, calculated decision. No grievance, no matter how deep, no pain from a fractured relationship, no toxic entanglement can ever justify the taking of innocent lives. Morality demands accountability. It cries out for remorse where there was none. The sacred value of every human breath must be protected by the law, lest we descend into chaos where passion becomes peril and love twists into lethal control. Today, we lay before you the chilling evidence in the case of Mackenzie Shirilla, a teenage girl from a quiet suburb whose outward confidence masked a storm of possessiveness and rage, turning an ordinary drive into an act of premeditated murder. Examine the exhibits closely, members of the jury, for they paint a picture colder than the dawn in which this horror unfolded. This was no tragic accident born of youthful recklessness. This was murder, purposeful, methodical, and devastating. Members of the jury, let us turn our attention first to the defendant herself, Mackenzie Shirilla. Envision her as she presented herself to the world, a 17-year-old high school senior living in Strongsville, Ohio, a peaceful suburban town just south of Cleveland, where tree-lined streets and family homes create an illusion of safety and normalcy. To those who scrolled through her social media, she appeared the epitome of teenage normalcy, bubbly and outgoing, confident in front of the camera, immersed in the endless stream of TikTok dances, fashion hauls, and perfectly filtered selfies that captured flawless smiles and carefree moments. She posted about her life with enthusiasm, showcasing outfits, makeup, and adventures, drawing likes and comments from peers. Companies even noticed her growing online presence, sending her free products for reviews and promotions, a small taste of influence in the digital age. Her silver Toyota Camry became a symbol of her newfound independence, cruising those suburban roads with music blaring, windows down, embodying the freedom that comes with turning 17. Behind the wheel, she seemed in control, navigating her world with a poise that belied her age. In her social circle, Mackenzie held sway, a quiet authority that made her the one others looked to, the one who decided plans, who influenced moods. She enjoyed the privileges of her relationship, often staying at the Russo family home, integrating into her boyfriend's life so deeply that his relatives initially embraced her fully, treating her like one of their own. This was a young woman who exerted emotional power, particularly over her boyfriend, Dominic Russo. Dominic was 20 years old, described by those who knew him as street smart, strikingly good-looking, the kind of young man who was always surrounded by friends, drawing people in with his charisma and easy confidence. Despite the 3-year age difference, Mackenzie and Dominic had been in a relationship for several years, progressing to the point where they moved in together in 2021. To outsiders glancing at their social media or seeing them together, Mackenzie appeared the one in command, navigating the dynamics with determination, her influence subtle but undeniable in how she shaped their shared life. But members of the jury, power without restraint can fester and twist into something profoundly dangerous. Delve into the psychology of this young woman. What begins as confidence in adolescence can, under pressure, morph into control when insecurity and possessiveness take root. Friends and family who knew her intimately would later testify to the cracks beneath the surface, a controlling nature that emerged in private, turning arguments into battles of will. The volatility of teenage emotions, amplified by the intensity of young love, can create undercurrents of fear and manipulation. In Mackenzie's case, her sway over Dominic was not always gentle. It could erupt into demands, into efforts to dictate his actions, his associations, his very freedom. Now, shift your gaze to the victims, members of the jury. Two young men whose lives brimmed with potential, cut short in a moment of unimaginable violence. First, Dominic Russo, at 20 years old, embodied the vibrant spirit of youth. Good-looking with an effortless charm, street-smart in a way that made him adaptable and admired, he was rarely alone. Friends gravitated toward him, drawn to his energy and loyalty. His family cherished him deeply. His mother, Christine Russo, spoke often of his light, the way he filled rooms with his presence. Dominic's life had become deeply intertwined with Mackenzie's, but as witnesses would reveal, that intertwining came at a cost, an imbalance where control and threats chipped away at harmony. Then there was Davion Flanagan, only 19 years old, a recent graduate of Strongsville High School. Davion was simply a friend, innocent and uninvolved in any personal conflicts, who happened to join them that fateful night. Described by his family as a special young man, kind, full of promise, with a bright future ahead, he was collateral in a tragedy he had no part in creating. His loved ones would later mourn the theft of his dreams, the ordinary milestones he would never reach. Imagine their worlds, members of the jury, the laughter shared with friends, the plans for the future, the simple joys of being young and alive in a suburban summer. Dominic and Davion represented all that is hopeful in youth, the potential for growth, love, achievement. In one catastrophic instant, that potential was obliterated, leaving only grief and questions. Exhibit A. Members of the jury. The relationship between Mackenzie Shirilla and Dominic Russo. A toxic brew of volatility that simmered and exploded repeatedly. Friends who observed them closely described it not as a typical rocky romance, but as something far more intense. Explosive outbursts, dramatic highs and lows, a pattern of control that dominated their interactions. By July 2022, the relationship had escalated to terrifying heights. Arguments were not occasional. They were constant, fueled by breakups followed by frantic reconciliations. Testimony painted Mackenzie as increasingly possessive, her behavior crossing into abuse, verbal degradation, destruction of property, and threats that chilled those who heard them. Consider the psychological layers here, members of the jury. In young relationships, emotions run high. Jealousy can feel all-consuming. Insecurity can manifest as control. But when boundaries erode completely, when one partner seeks to dominate the other through fear, the result can be a dangerous spiral. Witnesses recounted specific incidents. Mackenzie allegedly threatening to crash the car during fights. Words that might have been dismissed as hyperbole in the moment, but now resonate with deadly significance. 2 weeks before the fatal crash, during one particularly heated argument, a witness observed Mackenzie screaming at Dominic, attempting to physically strike him, and explicitly threatening to wreck the car right there and then. Videos recovered from Dominic's phone captured her in these rages, berating him harshly, using manipulative language designed to wound and control. Prosecutors uncovered a broader pattern of threats, promises to key his car, to break into his home, to harm him if he ever tried to leave her for good. Former friends of Mackenzie testified to even more ominous statements. She had once declared she would crash the car to end it all, a remark brushed off as teenage drama at the time. But in retrospect, members of the jury, these were not idle words. They revealed a mindset where despair and rage intertwined, where the idea of losing control over the relationship could lead to thoughts of total destruction. The psychology is profound. Possessiveness unchecked breeds fear in the controlled, desperation in the controller. Teenage brains, still developing impulse control and emotional regulation, are particularly vulnerable to such escalations, but that vulnerability does not excuse the descent into violence. Now, let us examine the events leading up to the tragedy of July 31st, 2022. In the weeks prior, the tension in Mackenzie and Dominic's relationship reached a boiling point. Text messages exchanged between them, along with social media posts, documented ongoing fights, accusations, pleas, reconciliations that never lasted. The volatility was evident to those close to them, a cycle that seemed unbreakable. Then, just days before the crash, something chilling emerged from the investigation. Surveillance footage showing Mackenzie driving the exact same obscure route through an industrial area in Strongsville, an isolated spot far from residential neighborhoods, featuring a vacant warehouse with a solid brick wall at the end. Investigators interpreted this as a trial run, a deliberate practice of the path she would soon take with fatal intent. This was not random exploration. It was premeditation, evidence that the act to come was planned, not a spur-of-the-moment impulse. The fatal night unfolded in the early morning hours of July 31st, 2022, around 5:30 a.m. Surveillance cameras in that deserted industrial section of Strongsville captured the sequence in stark, unforgiving detail. Mackenzie Shirilla was behind the wheel of her silver Toyota Camry. Dominic Russo sat in the passenger seat, Davion Flanagan in the back. They had been out earlier that evening, smoking marijuana in a relaxed moment among friends, but now they were driving down Alameda Drive in the pre-dawn quiet. The footage revealed the horror, the car slowly circling the area at first, as if building to the moment, then a sudden, vicious acceleration. No hesitation visible. Mackenzie floored the gas pedal, propelling the vehicle to 100 miles per hour in seconds, steering straight into the brick wall of the vacant warehouse. The impact was cataclysmic, the car crumpling upon contact like tin foil, metal twisting, glass shattering in a violent explosion of force. There were no skid marks on the pavement, no evidence of attempted braking or swerving to avoid the wall. First responders arrived to a scene of utter devastation, firefighters and police officers rushing forward, their urgent assessments confirming the worst. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan were pronounced dead at the scene, their lives ended in an instant by the sheer violence of the collision. Mackenzie Shirilla, miraculously or perhaps calculatedly positioned, survived with injuries that were serious but not life-threatening. She was alert and conscious when taken to the hospital. The location itself speaks volumes. Members of the jury, an isolated industrial zone chosen in the early morning hours when roads were empty, minimizing the chance of witnesses or immediate intervention. This was not a populated street where help might arrive quickly. It was methodical selection for maximum lethality with minimal interruption. The investigation began innocently enough, initially classified as a tragic accident involving teens, perhaps reckless driving after a night out. Mackenzie's survival and her alertness in the aftermath prompted questions, but it was the vehicle's event data recorder, commonly known as the black box, that shattered any illusion of accident. This device recorded the final moments with precision. Mackenzie intentionally depressed the accelerator pedal to 100% throttle in the last seconds before impact, maintaining full power as the speed climbed to 100 miles per hour. The brakes were never applied, not even a touch. No mechanical failures were found in the vehicle, no evidence of a medical emergency striking the driver at that critical time. The data was irrefutable. This was deliberate acceleration into oblivion. Combined with the prior threats she had made, the surveillance footage of the trial run days earlier, and the documented toxicity of the relationship, the picture emerged clearly, a mission driven by intent to kill. One of the most heartbreaking pieces of evidence, members of the jury, was the notification to Dominic's mother, Christine Russo. Police officers arrived at her doorstep, their expressions grave, the kind that immediately signals unbearable news. As they informed her of an incident involving her son Dominic, her world shattered. She collapsed in agony, screams of disbelief echoing through the quiet neighborhood as she wailed, "Oh God," over and over, refusing to accept that he was gone. Her cries pierced the morning air, questions tumbling out in desperation. Why? Where were they going? She expressed immediate distrust of Mackenzie's driving habits, a mother's intuition sensing something deeply wrong even in her grief. The raw, visceral pain of that moment, as reality crushed her spirit, is something no parent should endure. The families of both victims were left in ruins. Davion Flanagan relatives grieved the loss of a young man who was simply in the wrong place, his involvement purely incidental, his future stolen without reason. Mackenzie's demeanor in the immediate aftermath added another layer to the evidence. Transported in a police cruiser to the hospital, she displayed an eerie fluctuation, periods of calm detachment, staring silently out the window as if processing nothing, interspersed with sudden tears that subsided quickly. To investigators, this was not the consistent outpouring of genuine remorse or shock one might expect from someone in a true accident. It suggested a composure that contradicted the gravity of what had occurred. The trial commenced in August 2023 when Mackenzie, now 19, faced a barrage of 12 serious charges, multiple counts of murder, felonious assault, aggravated vehicular homicide, and more. It was a bench trial, presided over by Judge Nancy Margaret Russo. No jury, but a judge tasked with weighing the evidence alone. Prosecutors argued powerfully that Mackenzie had turned her car, a 3,500-pound machine, into a deadly weapon, likening it to a missile launched intentionally amid the toxicity of her relationship with Dominic. They presented the black box data, the surveillance videos, the prior threats, building a case of purposeful intent. The defense countered by portraying it as a tragic accident stemming from reckless teenage judgment. They suggested possible memory loss due to brain trauma from the crash, floated theories like the passengers grabbing the wheel or panic causing erroneous acceleration. They argued that while reckless, there was no proof beyond reasonable doubt of specific intent to kill. But then the videos were played in court, the surveillance capturing the straight, unrelenting path at full speed into the wall, the earlier test run, the documented threats. The black box evidence stood unassailable. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the defense's narrative unraveled under the weight of facts. On August 14, 2023, Judge Russo delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts. In her ruling, the judge stated unequivocally, this was a culmination of decisions by one person, the defendant. Those decisions forever altered futures. The totality of evidence demonstrates Mackenzie Shirilla acted purposely and intentionally. Her purpose was death, controlled, methodical, deliberate. This was not reckless driving. This was murder. The judge described Mackenzie as literal hell on wheels, executing a mission of death with chilling precision. Sentencing followed on August 21, 2023. Mackenzie received concurrent sentences of 15 years to life, making her eligible for parole after serving 15 years. In that moment, Mackenzie broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably as the reality of her future sank in, tears flooding the courtroom where composure had once dominated. Victim impact statements delivered raw, unfiltered pain. Family members spoke of Dominic and Davion being robbed of their futures, urging Mackenzie to be thankful she was alive while their loved ones were not. One lamented the world losing a special man in Davion, who never supposed to be there. Christine Russo expressed the betrayal of someone who had been treated like family, now being the reason her son was gone. The immeasurable grief hung heavy, lives fractured irreparably. The judge weighed consecutive versus concurrent sentences, ultimately deciding concurrent was sufficient, believing the life tale would likely keep Mackenzie incarcerated longer regardless. Members of the jury, in the aftermath, public opinion split sharply, some expressing sympathy for a young woman spiraling in a toxic dynamic, others outraged at the manipulation and lack of accountability. Appeals were filed, but upheld as recently as late 2024. Mackenzie Shirilla remains incarcerated at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. This case forces us to probe the darker corners of human nature, how toxic relationships can breed destruction, how unchecked emotions in youth can turn fatal. Was this premeditated revenge for perceived slights, or a heat-of-the-moment explosion of despair? The evidence overwhelmingly points to intent, deliberate and undeniable. Ladies and gentlemen, justice has been served in the eyes of the law, yet there are no true winners here. Two vibrant young lives erased forever, families left with voids that time cannot fill, and a young woman now confronting the consequences of her actions in the cold shadows of prison. Human nature is a paradox, capable of profound love and connection, yet harboring the potential for abysmal darkness when rage and control overtake reason. The law exists to draw a firm line. Deliberate harm must be held accountable, or society risks unraveling into vengeance and chaos. Every decision carries weight. Mackenzie Shirilla's choices robbed futures not only from Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan, but from herself and all who loved them. As we depart this courtroom, let us ponder deeply. In the tempest of youth, where does passion end and peril begin? Morality and the law converge in their answer. Life is sacred, never to be wielded as a tool for vengeance or control. The evidence has convicted not only Mackenzie Shirilla, but serves as a stark reminder to us all. Choose wisely in moments of anger, for one instant's rage can echo through eternity, destroying everything in its path. Thank you, members of the jury. The truth stands revealed. Case closed.